It's been 5 years since I uploaded my first video on this channel, and that means 5 years since I played Butterfree in Pokemon Yellow, essentially for the first time, even though I kind of did it when I was a kid. Following that initial Butterfree video, I felt that things were too easy with Sleep Powder. I came back, tried it again without Sleep Powder, and then I even came back and did it for a third time, beating the game with only physical moves. Back in the day, I didn't know what my purpose was. I was just trying to make some videos and learn how Premiere Pro worked. I figured it would help me in my other field of work, but now I am a dedicated solo challenge runner, and I have found my purpose: to beat the main series games with every species as fast as possible. And I have not ranked Beedrill, Butterfree, or my current channel mascot Venomoth in my tier list yet. So today, in celebration of this channel's 5-year anniversary, I am going to tackle all 3 of these bugs. To me, they're a really interesting trio. In terms of base stats, Venomoth is by far the best of the 3. But then if we look at TM and HM learn set, I actually think that Beedrill comes out ahead of both Butterfree and Venomoth because it does get access to Swords Dance, probably the second best move in the entire game, only falling short of Amnesia. But when we look at level up learn sets, I think that Butterfree comes out ahead of both of the others, because it learns Sleep Powder at level 15, and it also starts with Confusion, which gives it a good special move to use against Brock to make it by the first gym leader who often walls Pokemon. And speaking of Pokemon getting walled, let's start out today with Beedrill. For base stats, it has 65 HP, 80 attack, 40 defense, 75 speed, 45 special attack, and a crit rate of 14.45%. All 3 of these Pokemon have a medium fast growth rate, so there's going to be no advantage for a specific Pokemon there. Then, in terms of move pool, we start with Fury Attack and nothing else. This move is a multi-hit move, which if it crits, it will do the same amount of damage on each hit. However, it only has 15 base power, 85% accuracy, and 20 PP. Which is actually low in this case. It's going to be a problem. I'll talk about why in 1 second. Through level up, we get Fury Attack again at level 12, Focus Energy at level 16, which by the way quarters your chance to critical hit, so it makes it less likely for Beedrill to crit, not more likely. This is a bug in Generation 1, and it's really frustrating. Speaking of bugs, Twin Needle at level 20, a bug type move, which is Beedrill's signature move in Generation 1. It's got a base power of 25, a 100% accuracy, and it hits twice per turn. Only the second hit though can inflict poison in this game. It seems like a kind of weak move, but in this run I am going to make the case to all of you that Twin Needle is actually an amazing move. Beyond that, Beedrill gets Rage at 25, Pin Missile at 30, and Agility at 35. Okay, TMs and HMs, this is where things get good for Beedrill, even though it doesn't have access to wide coverage. The notable moves here are Swords Dance, Mega Drain, and Swift. Also, one notable omission, we do not get access to Body Slam, which is pretty unfortunate. The HM move Cut might almost have a niche with Beedrill as a good normal type move that comes decently early into a playthrough. It has okay accuracy and better base power when compared with something like Rage, which locks you in after you use it, or Fury Attack, which has a more substantial chance to miss. That said, in Generation 1 there is no move deleter, so I don't think Cut's going to be seeing play today. Okay, so I'm sure you're all seeing the problem here. While we do get access to a grass type move, Mega Drain, we don't get access to it until after we beat Erica, so I'm going to have to solve Brock using only Fury Attack, maybe Focus Energy, or Twin Needle at level 20. Now, when I started these solo challenges 5 years ago, grinding all the way to level 20 to beat Brock was no problem, because I wasn't timing myself, but I time myself now, and that's how I rank Pokemon. So to get the best possible time, I have to evaluate 3 different strategies for Beedrill in the early game. Number 1, beating Brock before level 16 using only Fury Attack. After all, each turn it can do up to 5 damage to each one of his Pokemon, if it's doing 1 damage per hit, that is, and that might give Beedrill the ability to beat him at the lower level. Number 2, beat him using a Focus Energy strategy at level 16, 17, 18, or 19. While it quarters my chance to critical hit, which is actually bad for Beedrill, it does give me the option of using a move that doesn't deal damage whenever Onix goes for Bide, which might give Beedrill the key advantage it needs in order to win at a lower level than 20, which is our third option, Twin Needle. Beedrill. If you didn't know, rock-type Pokemon and ground-type Pokemon do not resist bug-type moves, so Twin Needle will do neutral damage. Its base power is essentially 50 because it hits twice, and with the same type attack bonus, its effective power is going to be 75. Plus, we get the upside of occasionally poisoning his Pokemon. I have used this strategy before, and it is incredibly dominant against Brock. It is by far the most consistent way to beat him in the early game. So this is my last resort strategy using Beedrill. We're going to give up a ton of time if we use Twin Needle, so I was hoping that one of the other two strategies might work. Before we get into damage ranges, I want to give one disclaimer. In this video, I'm only going to be going through my best attempt with all of these Pokemon that I've got so far. Typically, my format goes through my first playthrough, shows all of the problems that I have in it, and then I come back, optimize, and show you how I improved all of those challenges. I'm not going to be doing that today because if you want to see my first attempts with these Pokemon, you can just go back and watch the other videos on my channel. Okay, before we get into this, I want to say a huge thank you to Zealous Pawn and Austin for figuring out these routes. It accelerated my progress with these Pokemon so substantially. Okay, now let's talk about Brock. With a 2-hit against the Geodude, Fury Attack does between 2 and 4 damage, so it has the chance of rolling 2 damage on every hit, and then against Onix, it is only doing 1 damage per hit. This is the maximum level that I can face Brock at using only the Fury Attack strategy, because then once I level up to 16, Beedrill gets access to Focus Energy. This is a disadvantage because then I would have to spam out all of the PP on Focus Energy before going back to fight Brock with only Fury Attack. That is, if I want to have the option of using Struggle once I deplete all of Fury Attack's PP. The alternative here is spamming out some of Focus Energy's PP, saving a few of them so that I can use them when Onix comes in and uses Bide. That said, I don't really think that strategy is particularly good against Brock because Bide only accumulates damage from the first hit that Fury Attack inflicts. All of the subsequent hits just don't accumulate anything. It's kind of like how multi-hit moves work with critical hit mechanics. Only the first hit matters. After that, the damage is just replicated and nothing else is calculated. What I found in my previous testing is that it doesn't matter if the Onix is using Bide, you should just keep Fury Attacking into it because it's going to deal so little damage with this move anyway. And so to me, this battle really comes down to the fact that Beedrill needs to do more damage, it needs to have more health, it needs to have more defense to lower Brock's damage ranges, and the only way to do those 3 things in the early game is just to level up more. At level 17, the amount of damage that Fury Attack is doing per hit increases by 1, potentially against the Onix. It can still do 1 per turn, but it can also do 2 per turn. However, we still have health problems here because we haven't increased our damage against the Geodude just yet. At level 18, that finally happens. Then Fury Attack with 2 hits does between 4 and 6 damage instead of 2 and 4 damage. 2 more damage per turn is a massive change, and I also have the upside of doing 2 damage per turn against the Onix. Plus now Beedrill has more health and more defense. The defense increase actually helps here. If the Geodude gets a critical hit, it does 1 less damage at level 18, which wasn't the case at level 17. All the other damage ranges improved at level 16. That said, level 18 feels like the perfect balance of all of these factors. We're not training too much to get Twin Needle. The fight is significantly more consistent because I can knock the Geodude out quickly, not taking too much damage from Tackle. Now, unlike in Red and Blue where the Geodude does have Defense Curl because it's 2 levels higher, in Yellow it only has Tackle, so it's just going to be spamming attacking moves, doing between 4 and 5 damage per turn. Then once I make it to Onix, I'm going to be able to knock it out, hopefully doing 2 damage per hit. And at level 18 with the increased damage ranges, I don't need to worry about wasting time spamming out Focus Energy against a Metapod in the forest. So I decided to go for this as my strategy. But while we're watching the training, which is really slow, and I'm going to talk about in just a second, if you're noticing my Beedrill's at a low level compared to what I'm talking about, that's just because there's still more to talk about in this section of the game. Hold your horses. First, let's talk about how dominant Twin Needle is. Against the Geodude, on turn 1, it will do between 83 and 103% damage. So even without a critical hit with the maximum damage roll, it can get a 1-shot. Then against the Onix, it's gonna 2-hit. Twin Needle is so much better than Fury Attack. But again, leveling to 20 is just gonna waste too much time. So let's talk about how I can save seconds in this early section of the game. Number 1, I want to make my way to Pewter City as fast as possible and take on the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym. Knocking the Diglett out with Fury Attack is possible at a very low level on minimum battles, but I'm not strictly heavily on minimum battles here. I have been knocking out wild encounters as I went because I need as much experience as fast as possible. Defeating the Diglett and then losing to the Sandshrew is a possibility for Beedrill, but it's not guaranteed because I could get critical hits with Fury Attack against the Sandshrew, knocking it out quickly. The ideal scenario for me here is that I knock the Diglett out as fast as possible, then Beedrill misses a bunch of Fury Attacks, it knocks me out with Sandshrew, and then I can repeat this battle over and over again for trainer boosted experience. In this run specifically, I got really lucky and I blacked out to the junior trainer 3 times in a row before finally defeating him. This let me get Beedrill almost to level 11 before going back and fighting wild Pokemon in the forest. While I'm doing this, I'm also going to be backtracking through the area and then fighting the trainers that I skipped up until now. There are 3 bug catchers and 1 lass here that I can battle. Unlike in Pokemon Red and Blue, there are 2 extra trainers here which are yellow version exclusives, so that is a nice little boost of experience in this section of the game. I recently completed Beedrill in Pokemon Red on stream, and it did not do well. It was a really rough run. My second playthrough time was 1 hour 2 minutes and 36 seconds, so it's one of the rare fully evolved Pokemon that was not able to get a sub-hour time in the Generation 1 games. And I think the same is going to be true here in Pokemon Yellow. While it is going to beat Brock 2 levels lower than it did in Pokemon Red and Blue, in those games I just trained to level 20 to get access to Twin Needle since both of Brock's Pokemon are 2 levels higher. In Yellow, there are still a lot of other threats later into the game, like many of the mid-game trainers are just so much stronger and have Psychic type moves, which is not good for Beedrill, a poison type. For these reasons, I think that Beedrill is going to be the worst of the 3 Pokemon that we're playing today. Now, one thing that another solo challenge player, Redriosi, would want me to mention in this early game is a potential for squeezing out more trainer boosted experience. I can fight wild Pokemon in the forest until Fury Attack has no PP left. Then I can make my health go down slightly, fighting some Pokemon with struggle. After that, I could fight any of the remaining trainers, knock out their first Pokemon, gain experience from it, and then black out to their second Pokemon. Or potentially I could fight the guy with 2 Metapod and 1 Caterpie, knock out his first 2 Pokemon using struggle, and then black out on his final Metapod. This way I can continue to farm the trainers for more experience later. I don't do that in this playthrough, and I'm not going to give everything away yet, so I'll talk about why later on. Instead, I just grind as much as possible. I do black out here to a wild Pokemon. This is just so I get teleported back to Pewter City as fast as possible. Also, whenever you get teleported back, your Pokemon is automatically healed, so you skip the healing animation, the text, as well as walking into the Pokemon Center, and 1 map transition animation. I already purchased all of my items before fighting the junior trainer, so I also don't care about losing money. So the question is, how long does it take Beedrill to grind up until level 18? One advantage for it along the way is the fact that all the Pokemon in this game are at higher levels than they are in Red and Blue. For example, I'm fighting more Metapod, higher level Pidgeys, and occasionally a rare Pidgeotto. I think it was kind of unlucky in this playthrough. I only got a single one when my Beedrill was at level 14. Still, I was able to knock it out despite the fact that it does no Sand Attack. I think it's a miracle in Generation 1 that Gust is a normal type move for Beedrill. If it wasn't, this early grinding would be so much more hellish. So in the end, everything considered, the grinding takes me roughly 16 minutes and 45 seconds to get to level 18. And now, at long last, I am ready to face Brock. But first, I want to talk about the sponsor of this video, Raycon. I have really been enjoying their everyday headphones. The build quality is so fantastic, and while they are Bluetooth headphones, you can actually plug them in with a replaceable cable, which is incredibly important when Rosie loves to chew all of my headphone cables. It's so nice to not have to replace my headphones when I accidentally leave the cable out and she destroys it overnight. Their new Everyday Earbuds Classic feature active noise cancellation, which was the one feature they were missing before. They've got 8 hours of playback time, 3 sound modes tailored to your preference, reliable earbud button functions, awareness mode, optimized gel tips for custom and comfortable fit. And I think the thing that's most important about Raycon is that buying them is not going to break the bank. They've got audio quality that rivals the other big audio brands that you love at half the price. Click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/ScottsThoughts to get 20% off the Everyday Earbuds Classic. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring the video, and now let's get back to Brock. This fight is very straightforward, there's not that much to say about it other than the fact that if I get a critical hit, it will greatly speed up my progress. I don't against the Geodude, which is kind of annoying. I knock it out and then I have 15 PP left for the Onix, which should be enough. There is the possibility that Beedrill loses here. Onix can stack up a bunch of screeches, lowering my defense, and then hit for a lot of damage using either tackle or bind. What I want to have happen here is the Onix just go for screech or bide over and over again, wasting its time, and that'll give Beedrill the time it needs to knock the Onix out. I think this fight is good at illustrating just how close things can be against Brock, because by the time I knock the Onix out, Beedrill is on red health. So that is a first split of 17 minutes and 48 seconds, which is really underwhelming. It's a terrible start to the game. Beedrill is going to have to do everything in its power to gain back time from here on out, if it wants to be even close to Butterfree or Venomoth's time. But before I talk about the current channel's mascot, let's go back to the original mascot, Butterfree. It's obviously not going to struggle against Brock nearly as much as Beedrill did, since many of us as kids used Butterfree to get by Brock. I know I did. I didn't even know that you could use a fighting type Pokemon like Mankey to defeat his Pokemon, or Nidoran male or female with a double kick. Every single time I played Yellow as a kid, I would just grab a Metapod, level it up to 10 where it evolved into Butterfree, and learned Confusion. Now this is one key thing that I want to cover about the level up learn set of Butterfree. If you start fully evolved, then you only get access to Confusion at level 1. That means Butterfree loses out on Tackle, String Shot, and Harden. The last of these is probably the most significant, since Butterfree is not going to have access to Harden during this challenge. While you might think having access to a badge boosting move would overall speed up Butterfree's progress, that's just not the case, because evolving from a Caterpie to a Metapod and then eventually into a Butterfree takes longer than the time that Harden would save. Without badge boosting, we still have what we need for Brock. Confusion, which when I was a kid I thought was one of the best moves in the game since it did so much damage to Brock's Pokemon. For base stats, Butterfree has 60 HP, 45 attack, 50 defense, 70 speed, and 80 special. It has a 13.67% chance to crit. Now with a decent special stat and Confusion early on, you might think that fighting Brock on minimum battles would make the most sense for Butterfree, but that isn't the case. At level 6, Butterfree does between 5 and 7 damage per hit to the Geodude. It has an 8.1% chance to 4 hit and a 98.9% chance to 5 hit, meaning it is highly likely that Butterfree is going to be attacked 4 times in a row by the Geodude. And the Rock type has an 84% chance to knock Butterfree out in 4 turns using Tackle. This is obviously just not good enough, since then we would have to knock out the Onix, and Butterfree has a 63.8% chance to 4 hit it. These damage ranges mean that early game optional training is required for Butterfree. Luckily, most of this is quite fast. The Lass just inside of the forest has 2 poison type Pokemon, and Butterfree can knock them both out in 2 hits each. Now, I'm not going to fight every single bug catcher inside of the forest, just the first guy with 2 Caterpie, the next yellow version exclusive with a Caterpie and a Metapod, and then the mandatory bug catcher at the end of the forest. This way, inside the Pewter City gym, I can fight the junior trainer, leveling Butterfree up to 10 after knocking out the Diglett. By doing things this way, Butterfree is now going to level up after it knocks out Brock's Geodude, which will guarantee a 3 hit against his Onix. Starting at level 10, I have a roughly 1 in 4 chance of knocking the Geodude out in 2 hits, but it's more likely that I'm going to 3-shot, which is what happens here. I lose 15 health, roughly 1/3 before the Onix comes in. Also, it's key to note that leveling to 11 gave Butterfree exactly 24 speed, so that it always moves first against the Onix. This ensures that there can be no speed tie shenanigans if the Onix is choosing Bide. So with optional training to make this happen, Butterfree is able to get a 3 minute and 29 second Brock split. It is now in a massive lead compared to Beedrill, but we still have to go through Venomoth, and it just might be the best solo challenge bug in Generation 1. Well, that might be slightly too general. First, let's cover what it gets in Pokemon Yellow. It starts with Tackle, Disable, Supersonic, and Confusion, and then through level up it gets Poison Powder at 22, Leech Life at 27, Stun Spore at 30, Psybeam at 38, Sleep Powder all the way at 43, and finally Psychic at level 50. Interestingly, in Red and Blue, its starting set is much worse. Tackle, Disable, Poison Powder, and Leech Life. And then there's one other small weird change. At level 24 it gets Poison Powder instead of 22. I have no idea why they made that incredibly niche change. Like, who's catching a Venomoth at level 21 and then leveling it up and thinking, wow, Poison Powder 2 levels lower, that's just amazing. No one, only kids with Game Sharks, and I was not a kid with a Game Shark. The fact that Venomoth lacks Confusion in the early game in Pokemon Red and Blue makes it much more difficult in those games. I'll have to play it on stream sometime, but if you want to see another player play it, go check out J-Rose's video. Luckily today, we have access to Confusion, and with Venomoth's base stats, 70 HP, 65 attack, 60 defense, 90 speed, and 90 special, Venomoth can leverage its higher special stat to beat Brock at a lower level than Butterfree did with roughly the same consistency. Thank you, Churro, we really appreciate your commentary as well. Inside Viridian Forest, I'm going to skip some of the bug catchers as well as the lass. I'm fighting the second bug catcher since the Metapod don't waste my time when they use Harden. They're always going to be a 3-hit using Venomoth unless it gets a lucky critical hit. Then fighting only the mandatory trainer at the end of the forest brings Venomoth up to level 8, and this gives it roughly the same fight against Brock that Butterfree had. It starts the battle at level 8, it has an 82.2% chance to 3-shot the Geodude, and then it levels up to 9, outspeeding the Onix, and Confusion has a 38.5% chance to 3-shot, and a guaranteed 4-hit. So the damage range isn't quite as good against the Onix, but overall this fight feels very solid. And with a higher chance to crit than Butterfree, it's likely that Venomoth is going to be able to accelerate its pace in this fight at least once. Also, whenever the Onix goes for Bide, I can use Supersonic, either missing or confusing it, and if Onix hits itself, Bide gets cancelled, and then I can just go back to attacking with Confusion. So in this case, Supersonic is actually a safety measure that Butterfree doesn't have access to. Another reason Venomoth is by far the best Pokemon in the early game of these three. Also, Churro has been so vocal this morning, much more than usual. Anyways, I tried to record this segment multiple times without him in the background, but I just couldn't pull it off, so we got what we got. I apologize if you think it's distracting. He is very distracting, I understand. It is so hard for me to get work done now that I have cats. They're just constantly cute and I want to spend time with them. Back to Venomoth's playthrough. Rival 2 on Nugget Bridge is one of the more difficult fights in this entire run, and I ended up restarting this playthrough multiple times after losing to him. And that's even taking a bunch of measures to make him more consistent than he otherwise would be. If I just went through Route 3 and Mount Moon on minimum battles, I would get to the rival, and then the Sandshrew would probably be a 3-hit, and the Eevee could be as much as a 5-hit. In order to smooth things out, we want to line up our experience to get level 17 after we defeat Jesse and James. To do this, I fight the bug catcher on Route 3 instead of the lass because he gives slightly more experience. Then inside Mount Moon, I fight the Grass Lass and her 2 Pokemon, as well as the Hiker before going down to the basement floor. Doing this gives me enough experience to be 17 right after Jesse and James, and then I can use the rare candy from Mount Moon to level up over the damage rounding threshold to 18. As I head into Cerulean City, let's go through these damage ranges. So at level 17, Confusion is a 32% chance to 2-hit the Spearow. It is a 67.9% chance to 2-hit the Sandshrew, which is not good when it could use Sand Attack. And then it has a 58.8% chance to 4-hit the Eevee. But with the 1 rare candy at level 18, now I get a guaranteed 2-hit on the Sandshrew and a 43% chance to 3-hit the Eevee at the end of the battle. Spearow is unfortunately unchanged, and Peck does a lot of damage, between 28 and 33% per hit. Because of how bad the Spearow is alone, I think it makes sense to use the rare candy to smooth out the rest of the fight. Hopefully no sand attacks from the Sandshrew, and then you can make it through the rest of the battle. This fight comes so early into the playthrough, at roughly 6 minutes and 30 seconds, I didn't think it made sense for Venomoth to be saving before this battle, so whenever I would lose here, I would just restart the entire playthrough. Also, everything up until this point in the run is very consistent for Venomoth, so restarting here doesn't end up being that painful. It's not like we have to gamble through Brock and then we get to the rival and we lose and it feels terrible. If that was the case, I would have saved before this fight. Now, Venomoth does need to continue gambling throughout the next 2 gym battles. Unfortunately, its current set doesn't really give it moves that are good against either Misty or Surge. Confusion is great in the early game, especially against random trainers like everyone on Nugget Bridge, but its power has really fallen off by the time I would want to use it against a level 28 Raichu, and it's of course resisted by Misty's Starmie. At this point in the run, Venomoth doesn't really have any other options. We don't get Sleep Powder early on, Psybeam is at level 38, and Leech Life is at level 27, which would require rare candies to get this early on. Through TM and HM, it doesn't really have anything that it can use here. The notable moves are Mega Drain, Solar Beam, Psychic, and Swift, but none of those moves are available before we face Misty. But there is one option. I like to call this the Zealous Pawn Special now, because he uses it in pretty much every one of his playthroughs, and I think it is one of the best ways to defeat Misty, and that is to use Bide against her Starmie. For Route 25, I want to mention one thing here, which is we do fight the Hiker that has 3 Geodudes and 1 Machop. This just gives us slightly more experience, which will be important after losing Lieutenant Surge. For now, let's head into the second gym, defeat the junior trainer with Goldeen, and then I teach Venomoth Bide in the place of Disable. Okay, let's do this. The Bide strategy is not consistent, but it is very fast, and it prevents Pokemon from having to go to the SSN and then backtracking to Misty later on into the playthrough. Confusion is enough for Venomoth to manage Misty's Staryu. Typically it's going to be a 3-hit, but in this case I inflict Confusion, which slightly speeds up progress. Okay, let's talk about the Starmie, because there is a speed tie here between Venomoth at level 23 and Misty's Starmie at level 21. Speed ties when using Bide can cause some absolute mayhem. In Generation 1, Bide calculates the amount of damage that it needs to store every turn when your Pokemon should be making its attack. So if I win the speed tie, use Bide, and then Starmie attacks into me, I don't actually accumulate the damage from its first hit. It waits until the next turn to figure out if I should accumulate damage. So then Starmie could win the speed tie, move first, use Harden, which resets the amount of damage done to 0, and then when Venomoth moves second, it accumulates 0 damage, and Starmie was able to attack in with a Bubble Beam for free. Then on the next turn, if Bide continues accumulating damage and Venomoth moves first, it will once again accumulate damage from Harden on the previous turn, and then Starmie could attack in again for free, causing Venomoth to, say, outspeed on the next turn, dealing 0 damage to the Starmie, even though it seems like I should have absorbed damage from 2 Bubble Beams during that interaction. There is also a beneficial opposite scenario to this, which is where you accumulate damage from 1 Bubble Beam, and then on the next turn, you move first, and you accumulate damage from the same Bubble Beam another time. This happens when the player's Pokemon moves second on the first turn and then first on the second turn. In some cases, Bide is just going to obliterate the Starmie instantly, but in other cases, we could just do 0 damage and it feels pointless. The thing about Misty is the resets here are really fast, and you know pretty early on if you're getting a bad scenario against the Starmie. Sometimes if you deal back less damage than you would like to, which was the case here for Venomoth, then you can just ping down the Starmie using other moves like Confusion and Tackle. And in this playthrough, I have no resets to Misty. I was expecting 1 or 2 in most playthroughs here, so getting by her with a clean run for Venomoth is very encouraging. Its second gym split is 10 minutes and 23 seconds, which is really good for this point in the game. Sandy is a little bit annoying. Confusion isn't doing enough damage to one-shot her Pokemon, so you can get hit by Sand Attack. This has the potential to mess up Venomoth here, but I didn't lose to her in any of my runs, so I didn't feel it was worth investing in a save before her. Plus, if I did reset to her, I think I would just want to restart the entire playthrough. On the SSN, let's talk about one optional ordering that you can change in this route. You could potentially fight the rival before the gentleman with his fire types. This means Venomoth will be a higher level, which makes the fire types slightly easier to manage. I personally don't like this approach because I always count the rooms starting from the left, and then I go into the 4th room so that I can fight the gentleman. If I go from the right side, I get mixed up and then I don't go into the right room and I waste a bunch of time. Defeating him also gets me to level 25, but that doesn't really help against the rival since he's pretty easy. His Pokemon are underleveled by this point in the run, and there aren't a lot of problems that can happen to really any Pokemon here. The Sandshrew can use Sand Attack, but it's less likely than the previous fight, and it also comes in 3rd instead of 2nd. Plus I have the damage range here to confidently 2-shot. Okay, time for Surge, who's usually one of the worst gym leaders, but in this video he's not. He's actually scary for all of these Pokemon. With Venomoth we have 3 options. One of them is Supersonic, and that's obviously not an option because Supersonic has 55% accuracy. So the second option is using Confusion, which is going to 5 to 7 hit the Raichu. So this isn't really a good option either. So once again, the Zealous Pawn Special ends up being the best option against a gym leader. Here, we're just gonna go for Bide. Sometimes this goes very badly because Raichu does outspeed Venomoth. It can go for Mega Kick turn 1, and then at this point you've basically just lost because you've taken too much damage in the fight. What we want to have happen is Surge use something like Growl or X Speed on turn 1, and then attack into Venomoth on turn 2. Unfortunately, in my first battle he attacks turn 1 with Mega Kick, so I've lost this. That's Venomoth's first reset. But these resets are even faster than the resets we would have had against Misty, so it doesn't really matter if Venomoth loses here once or twice. choice. In the second fight, we get the ideal scenario. He goes for X speed on turn 1, which does absolutely nothing. Venomoth starts using Bide, and then Raichu uses Mega Kick. I'm able to survive the follow-up Mega Punch with 3 hit points. Venomoth unleashes energy, and Raichu goes down. That's a third split for Venomoth of 13 minutes and 51 seconds. So, just like it's typing, Venomoth is flying through this run. Okay, let's go back to Beedrill, the severe underdog in this challenge. Now, having to be over-leveled to defeat Brock at level 18 does give it an advantage throughout the next section of the game. It doesn't have to do any optional training. On Route 3, instead of fighting the Bugcatcher, which takes slightly more time, I'm gonna fight the Lass, move back to Pewter City, and then she'll move out of the way and I can make my way to Mount Moon. Inside, I'm only fighting the mandatory trainers, so the Fossil Nerd and Jesse and James. While I complete this section of the game, I want to go back and talk about something against Brock, which you might be thinking about. The question I anticipate might be on some of your minds is, why not start as a Weedle, get access to Poison Sting, which can poison Brock's Pokemon, then evolve to Kakuna, get Harden, which can increase Beedrill's defense stats, and then use this in combination with Poison Sting and Fury Attack to beat Brock at a lower level. Okay, first thing you need to understand, if a move is doubly resisted like Poison Sting is against Rock Ground type Pokemon, it can round down to 0 damage in Generation 1, which will cause the game to print a message saying that the move missed. If this occurs, then there would be no chance for Beedrill to poison Brock's Pokemon, so Poison Sting would need to deal at least 1 damage to his Pokemon. And then the second thing you need to understand is that Weedle, when it evolves to Kakuna, does not learn Harden. By the way, the same thing is true for Caterpie in Pokemon Red and Blue, but then in Yellow they fixed it so that when Caterpie evolves, it does learn Harden. Okay, it's time for the segment of the video I like to call Scott's Theories. I think that Game Freak didn't fix Weedle and Kakuna in Yellow version because these Pokemon aren't obtainable in the wild, so they just didn't bother to modify their learn sets. This results in the fact that when you start with Weedle and evolve to Kakuna, you never get access to Harden. So the only way to get a Beedrill with Harden in Generation 1 is starting with Kakuna, not having Poison Sting, and then using Struggle to level up to evolve Beedrill at 10. My series doesn't feature evolution, so this would be invalid no matter what. But I want to continue talking about weird things from Generation 1, because inside of Mount Moon, Beedrill is going to level up to 20, and here it learns its signature move, Twin Needle. The Bug type is super effective against the Grass type and the Poison type in Generation 1. Plus, the Poison type is super effective against the Bug type. In Beedrill's case, it also has the Poison type, which resists itself, so we're going to take neutral damage from Poison moves. But we do have super effective damage against all of the plentiful Poison types in this section of the game. And with the same type attack bonus, and the fact that Twin Needle is also getting the badge boost from Brock's badge, we're now doing incredible damage to any Poison type that we come across. And Beedrill's also going to do 4 times damage to any Grass Poison types that it encounters. If you don't believe me, you can see the interaction here where Beedrill one-turns the Coughing using Twin Needle because it's super effective. I wish that Game Freak had left this interaction intact. It makes the Bug type better, and using Bug type moves is not really what you want to do. Maybe they felt like they needed to nerf the Bug type a little bit since it is super effective against the Dark types that were introduced in Generation 2, but the Bug type was already not very good, as we are going to see by the end of this video, because then in my tier list I will have entries for every single Bug type that's in the game. I'm really looking forward to ranking them all against each other and seeing which one ends up being the best. Okay, heading into Cerulean City, I'm going to go straight for Misty's gym because Beedrill has super effective damage against her Starmie. While Beedrill isn't faster, it doesn't really matter because both Water Gun and Bubble Beam just won't do enough damage, and Twin Needle is doing more than enough to 2-turn. Defeating her first gives me a level up before fighting the rival, which is a little bit helpful since his Spearow is kind of problematic, taking multiple turns to knock out. Yes, Twin Needle does do the most damage here, and the downside of Fury Attack's accuracy makes me really not want to use it at this point in the game. I then have to get lucky 3-turning the Sandshrew. Hopefully it won't go for Sand Attack. Turn 1 it does, but it misses, and then it just doesn't choose the move again, allowing me to knock it out without my accuracy being lowered. Rattata also takes 2 turns to knock out, and so does the Eevee. Normal types are annoying for Beedrill to go up against at this point in the game. Twin Needle though is making the plentiful poison types along Route 24 and 25 very fast to knock out. Just before Bill's house, we get to see the first 4 times damage hit from Twin Needle against this Oddish, which gets completely destroyed with a single hit. Now, Twin Needle is a really good move, and it pairs very well with Beedrill because Bug-type damage against Psychic-type Pokemon in Generation 1 is fantastic. Twin Needle is one of 3 moves that can deal super effective damage to the Psychic-type in this game. The other 2 moves are Pin Missile, and Leech Life. Venomoth's gonna get Leech Life, but unfortunately in Generation 1, Butterfree gets no same type attack bonus moves. It's really sad. I wish Butterfree had the Psychic type in Generation 1, although then I never would have used any other Pokemon in my playthrough because Butterfree would have been able to solo the game very easily. For Beedrill in the SSN, we're going to do the same thing that I did with Venomoth, fighting only the Gentleman and then the rival. He's really easy here, nothing really to say about that, but then we have to take on Surge, and there are things to discuss here. Beedrill isn't really in a great position against him. Twin Needle has a 26.8% chance to 2-turn and a guaranteed 3-turn, but the Raichu's Thunderbolt deals between 52 and 63% damage, and Mega Kick deals between 47 and 56%. Plus, Raichu using Growl is very bad here because we're not using a move like Bide or a special attack, so really the only thing that Surge can do is a single turn of X speed, which is what happens right away. That is perfect. Next, Twin Needle does roughly 1/3, Raichu goes for its weaker move, Mega Punch, doing about 1/3 to Beedrill, then Twin Needle gets a critical hit, and like all multi-turn moves, it deals the same amount of damage with the second hit, allowing me to knock out the Raichu in only 2 turns. Beedrill gets a Surge split of 28 minutes and 23 seconds. The next section of the game is actually pretty good for Beedrill because Twin Needle provides excellent coverage against a lot of the Pokemon that frequently cause problems. For instance, all of the Wrapping Lasses Pokemon are 1-hits, and then the Slowpoke inside of the cave, while they do have confusion, I at least have super effective damage against them. The one trainer that Beedrill doesn't really have an answer to is the Self-Destructing Hiker. Twin Needle allows me to 2-turn all of his Rock-type Pokemon, but that still gives them chances to use Self-Destruct or Rock Throw. In this case, the first Geodude Self-Destruct's doing almost half damage to Beedrill, and while I do knock out the second one, then the Graveler Self-Destruct's dealing more damage, knocking Beedrill out, giving me my first reset of the playthrough. I think there's one potential strategy to make this fight more consistent. I could teach Beedrill Rest, fighting one more additional trainer on the SSN. Obviously moves like Focus Energy and Rage just aren't useful on my moveset at this point in the run, so there is space to add this move, and I won't be using it later into the playthrough, so solving this one trainer with it is a possibility. That said, I don't think the risk here is so high that it warrants fighting one additional trainer on the SSN and then going through all of the menuing in order to teach another move. Also, whenever you teach moves, there is the possibility that you accidentally overwrite something useful like Twin Needle when you're playing badly. This has happened to me on stream before. It's always really painful. Also, I should mention the fact that Rest takes a lot of time to work in battle. Even though you're healing and winning with no reset, you are still wasting time. So for all of these reasons, I just think that using Twin Needle exclusively to knock out these rock ground types is the superior strategy. South of Lavender Town, I head into the guardhouse and talk to this lady, getting myself the TM for Swift. Finally, Beedrill has access to a reliable normal type move. When fighting the mandatory Gambler before Celadon City, Beedrill levels up to 30, and here it can learn Pin Missile. I teach this in the place of Focus Energy, but I want to cover why I don't think Pin Missile is as good as Twin Needle. Number 1, accuracy. Number 2, if Pin Missile hits 2 or 3 times, it's going to do less damage when compared with Twin Needle. And if you didn't know, there is a higher likelihood of multi-strike moves hitting 2 or 3 times. There is a 37.5% chance that these moves hit 2 times or 3 times, and only a 12.5% chance that these moves hit 4 or 5 times. So on average, the damage output of a move like Pin Missile is going to be lower than Twin Needle, even though it has higher upside. Also, I think it's worth noting that Pin Missile wastes more time because it has to print more text, so that's why this move is not going to be sticking around on my set for very long. With all of these bug Pokemon, it doesn't really make sense to skip the Rocket Hideout in Celadon City. One extra rare candy is just going to help them all out. Also, in here with Beedrill, I fight the one optional trainer and pick up the TM for Double Edge, which is essentially its best normal type move, and I will be using it a little bit later on. For now, I'm heading to Erica's gym because the grass type specialist is going to be incredibly easy for Beedrill. Tangela's up first. Twin Needle here, it takes 2 turns to knock out and overall is annoying because I poison it and then it uses Bind. This wastes a lot of time printing additional poison text, which doesn't actually help me knock the Tangela out in fewer turns. Then with 4 times damage, I can knock out both the Weepinbell and the Gloom in single turns. The rival in Pokemon Tower is next, and Fearo's first. This presents a small problem for Beedrill. Swift is my best move to use against it, but since the Fearo is a flying type and the rival has good AI, he's always going going to be choosing Mirror Move, reflecting Swift back to me, meaning the Fearow gets the same type attack bonus with the normal move and it can do a lot of damage. This brings Beedrill down to orange health by the time I knock it out. Magnemite's next. I can use Twin Needle to knock it out, but it takes 2 turns, so I'm hit by 1 Sonic Boom before I take care of it, and Beedrill only has 31 health by the time the Shelter comes in. Luckily, this thing's kind of incompetent. Its moveset is Tackle, Withdraw, and Supersonic, but it tends to like to go Withdraw on first turns. At least that's the trend that I've noticed in these playthroughs. It so rarely does anything useful in the battle. In this case, it just does a Withdraw and then I knock it out. Sandshrew's next. This thing could use Sand Attack, and in this case it doesn't, but the following Eevee does just before I knock it out. So this fight has the potential to be a little bit sketchy, but overall, I don't think it's that concerning for Beedrill. The Chandler and Pokemon Tower are not a threat for Beedrill, which is so nice to say with a bad bug type. Fighting them reminds me of Scyther, when Scyther had to use Bide to get through these battles, and it was absolutely awful. And I think that that's an interesting comparison with Beedrill, because Scyther is a fully evolved bug type that is really bad in Pokemon Yellow. Because of Beedrill's bad Brock split, I think that it might be on track for a similar time. Jesse and James aren't a threat because they have poison types, and that really ends the portion of the mid-game where Pokemon don't have super effective moves against Beedrill. All of the major battles from here present quite the threat for this bug. We have Koga coming up soon, who is essentially a bug psychic specialist in Pokemon Yellow. Then we have Sabrina if I want to take her on without the badge boost from Blaine, or I could fight him and he has fire types. And the last time around when I played Beedrill, I actually stopped by the game corner, purchased myself a ridiculous number of coins, which wasted so much time, and then I bought Beedrill the Hyper Beam TM so that I could knock out Blaine's Pokemon more consistently. It's been roughly 4 years since I made that video, and there has been a lot of learning done in that time. I know that Hyper Beam and Substitute are basically never the choice that you want to go for now if you're optimizing for real time. So of course that's not going to be my play today, but I know someone will at least suggest it. Just remember that in Pokemon Yellow you have to buy coins 50 at a time. There is no option for purchasing coins in batches of 500. If there was, I am almost 100% sure that Hyper Beam would find its way into some playthroughs, and I think that Substitute might be used for some really bad Pokemon that want to improve their consistency. But as things are, it takes multiple minutes in order to earn each one of these TMs. Alright, so let's talk training on Cycling Road. 3 trainers here: Grimy Biker, the Wheezing Biker, as well as Biker Boss. Then inside of Sylph, I'm going to take a path that I typically don't go on. I go to the 5th floor right away in order to get the card key fairly quickly. I fight the Scientist with 4 Pokemon, who I call the Protein Scientist, and then I take on the mandatory Arbok trainer and grab the card key. This is so I can ascend through the Sylph floors and pick up Swords Dance more quickly, because it does help speed up all of these optional battles that I'm going to do here. Now I did mess up my battles here slightly. I forgot 2 of the trainers that I was supposed to fight. I fought the Reception Rocket and his 4 Pokemon, the Grimy Scientist who has just recently found his way into these playthroughs, the Stacked Scientist with his 5 Pokemon, the other guy with 4 Pokemon, and then finally the Machoke trainer at the top of the building. The other 2 trainers I forgot was the Rocket with Wheezing, Golbat, and Coughing, who is south of the one Rocket with 4 Pokemon, and then the Hypno Rocket who has Golbat, Drowsy, and Hypno. The thing is, this doesn't matter with the route because I'm only using rare candies once I arrive at Blaine. So I'm going to dig out and go to Koga. I will be 1 level lower for this battle than I otherwise would be, but that isn't going to affect the damage ranges in a way that matters. Inside the gym, I fight both of the Tamers for additional experience, and then I take on Koga at level 42. At this point in the run, Beedrill's moveset is Twin Needle, Agility, Swords Dance, and Swift. This is why it doesn't matter what level I'm here. I could have a 60% chance to knock out the Venonat with 1 hit if I go at level 43, but I'm just going to set up Swords Dance and Agility once on his first Pokemon, surviving both of its hits with Psychic. That's the damage range that matters. As long as Beedrill can survive, then I have enough damage to knock out the rest of his Pokemon in single hits. And for all of you that really care about small differences in numbers, Twin Needle has a 92.2% chance to knock out the Venomoth in a single hit. If I was to level up to 43, this damage range does get slightly better. It's 96.7%, but that just wasn't worth backtracking to Sylph and fighting 2 extra trainers, since I'm going back to Sylph after I defeat Koga anyway. Okay, Beedrill's gonna take on Rival 5 now, but before I do that, let's catch up with Butterfree. It's gonna fight Misty in the same way that Venomoth did using Bide, so I teach this move right after Brock when Butterfree has an open move slot. lot. This way I see slightly less text scrolling, and I don't have the potential error of accidentally overwriting a move like Confusion if I taught Bide from the pack once I had 4 moves on my set. Then over the course of Route 3 and Mount Moon, I get access to all of my status condition moves. In this case, the only one I'm going to be using in the entire playthrough is Sleep Powder, which comes last at level 15. In order to get to this level, I fight the Bug Catcher on Route 3, and then inside of Mount Moon I fight the Grass Lass, and that gives me just enough experience in order to get Sleep Powder. With Venomoth, I optimized for level to take on the rival, but with Butterfree I don't need to do that. Even though its special stat is lower, access to Sleep Powder now gives me an option to take him on and then save rare candies for later. That said, I really do have to emphasize now that Butterfree's entire playthrough and the results overall hinge exclusively on Sleep Powder being effective. If it just misses, there is a chance that Butterfree can lose at pretty much any point during this run, which is really frustrating. While I have historically really enjoyed playing Pokemon that have sleep-inducing moves, I think now that I've had a lot of time to sit with these games, I don't really like playing these runs. I just think back to Gengar and how awful it was getting the final run that I did with that thing because Hypnosis just always misses. But Gengar doesn't have a better option, and the same is true for Butterfree. I could level up more and make everything more consistent, but in the end, I'm just gonna get slower times by doing that. The thing that makes most sense is just gamble with Sleep Powder, and you can see here that that isn't always effective, as I lose to the rival on Nugget Bridge. I knew that getting a clean Butterfree playthrough was going to be pretty much impossible, so I decided to take the reset here instead of restarting the entire run. If I lose for a second time, then I'll restart the run. Spearow is kind of annoying because I miss and it hits me with Peck a bunch of times, but luckily after I knock it out, then everything just goes Butterfree's way and I'm able to sweep through the rival's team and come out victorious this time. Now, one small detail on Nugget Bridge that I should mention for some of these bugs is they don't have enough PP to make it through all of the Pokemon. That isn't really the case for Venomoth because it can use Tackle for chip damage, but with Butterfree, the only damage dealing moves I have are Confusion and Bide. Poison Powder isn't going to work against Pokemon like Weedle or Nidoran Female, so I can't push forward and use status conditions to slowly scrape through battles. Because of this, I do have to go back to the Pokemon Center one time in this whole section of the game, which wastes a bit of time, and I wish I could have prevented it, but there isn't really a way. Unlike in Fire Red, you have to fight one optional battle in order to get the Ether inside of Mount Moon. If it was free instead, I would have picked it up in Mount Moon and then done this without a heal. That would have saved Butterfree some time, but again, you have to do an optional battle, so going back to heal is just the better approach. Unlike with Venomoth, on Route 25, I'm going to battle this trainer who only has 2 Pokemon instead of the guy who has the 3 Geodude and 1 Machop. This saves a little bit of time in battle, and Butterfree isn't working towards a level up move like Venomoth is. Then I head to Misty's gym, and I'm going to win the same way I did with Venomoth using Bide on the Starmie. This is I guess a little bit more risky because we have lower special, so we take more damage from her water type moves. That said, we also dish out more damage because of that. The fact that Misty is fairly inconsistent with Butterfree is another reason why I'm fine taking resets on Rival 2. If I make it by her with no resets, then I kind of balance out the scales. It's pretty rare in my experience with Butterfree that you make it through both of these battles with no resets, and I wasn't going to gamble for that. In the end, I'm not playing 100 runs of each Pokemon. I'm doing like 4 or 5 maybe, and I have already done 4 playthroughs with Butterfree prior to this video. Today, I beat Misty with no resets, which is great, so Butterfree gets a second split of 11 minutes and 12 seconds. The rocket outside of Cerulean City is so annoying. It takes Butterfree forever to knock the Drowsy out using Confusion, and because I want to avoid Hypnosis and how much time that move can waste, I'm using Sleep Powder to put the Drowsy to sleep, which feels really wrong after you've played Fire Red and this thing has insomnia, but in Gen 1 it works, so I think this is the better option. Sleep or be slept. That's always the motto in these cases. Just like with Venomoth, Sandy has the potential to be a problem, but I'm playing a little bit risky here, deciding not to save. Again, she wasn't a problem for Butterfree in all the experiences that I had with it. Okay, this is where things change up a little bit for Butterfree. I finish off the rival on the SSN. I also did do the Gentleman's Second here. I remembered in this playthrough. It was kind of risky. I could have easily forgotten and skipped the rare candy, which would have totally ruined this run. Anyway, I did it successfully, and then after the ship departs, this is where we're gonna skip Surge. Unlike Venomoth, which is not a flying type, Butterfree is, so it's gonna take super effective damage from Surge's Thunderbolts, and Confusion is not gonna do enough damage. Using Bide against him when we take so much damage from Thunderbolt is a little bit risky, but we also want to pick up Psychic with Butterfree once we get to the mid-game, which means we're already walking from Celadon City into Saffron City, and then walking back back to Vermilion City immediately after picking up Psychic isn't going to take that long. Plus, then we can use the more powerful move in order to beat Surge more consistently. The wrapping last can actually be a problem for Butterfree. For this reason, I decided to use Sleep Powder on the first Oddish instead of saving before the battle. This way I can more likely dodge Stun Spore, knock out the Oddish in 2 hits with Confusion, and then from there I'm not going to use Sleep Powder ever again. If the second Oddish does Stun Spore me, then I'm going to hope that I can luck through the final Bellsprout, which is typically possible. I find it very unlikely for her to beat you if you get paralyzed late into the fight, but if she gets you on the first turn, then typically it's better to just reset. Rock Tunnel's annoying. Slowpokes take forever to knock out using Confusion. And because of this, and the fact that Butterfree is relying exclusively on this move for damage throughout this section of the game, we are going to run low on PP. But I picked up an Ether outside of Bill's house, and I also have the Elixir from Route 25, and I can use both of these healing items now in order to get through the cave. The self-destructing hiker is a lot easier than he was with Beedrill. I can use Sleep if I really want to here, or I can just spam Confusion and take the slightly riskier option. I'm using Sleep because I'm scared of the first or second Geodude going for Rock Throw and dealing devastating damage to Butterfree. One hit from one of these moves used by the Geodude does between 67 and 79% damage. And if the Graveler went for it, which takes 3 turns to knock out using Confusion, Rock Throw would do 75 to 89% damage. Zealous Bond did some math around the Sleep interactions in Generation 1 to figure out how much we should be spamming these moves, and here are the results when using Sleep Powder. In this case we have a downside of 25%, so we could miss and lose 1 turn. But if we do hit with Sleep, then the average number of turns that we're going to gain is 3, because in Generation 1 Sleep can last from 0 to 6 turns. And in the case that it lasts 0 turns, we can just roll again for Sleep because the enemy wakes up and can't attack. If we plug all this math in, then we see that we have an upside of 3 turns gained and a downside of 1 turn lost. So in the end, the average expected turns gained through Sleep Powder is 2. When I was a kid, I didn't get the math behind it, but I always felt that putting the opponent to sleep was just the best way to play, and it turns out that is actually how it works out mathematically. Okay, Celadon City. In the Rocket Hideout, I'm going to pick up the double-edged TM, and Butterfree is going to use this move a little bit during the mid-game. Then I go and I grab the Fly TM, and here I just want to rewind quickly to right after the wrapping lasts. This item ball just below this edge is the Teleport TM. I could pick this up with Butterfree and then teach it in the place of one of my useless moves like Poison Powder. Then if we go back to the current time where I'm just picking up Fly, I could use Teleport to go back to Celadon City, saving a small amount of walk time. Here's the reason I chose not to go for this strategy. Number 1, I have to pick up another item which does waste time on screen printing additional text. Number 2, I have to open my bag and then teach Teleport to Butterfree without messing up. This is the primary reason I'm not going to be doing this strategy. And finally, number 3, the time saved by this one Teleport is not so substantial that it warrants picking it up. If you could use Teleport multiple times to save time throughout the entire run, then I think it might be worth it, but this would be the only spot that I would implement it since I want to change up Butterfree's moveset following this, since I'm heading to Saffron City to pick up Psychic, which then I use against Surge. This battle is still kind of sketchy. Butterfree has a 46.7% chance to 3-hit with the powerful Psychic type move, although that number doesn't account for the chance that I lower Special, which is a 33% chance in Generation 1. There is still the possibility of losing here even though we've delayed Surge. Thunderbolt does between 70 and 83% damage at the current level. Luckily for me, Butterfree has Sleep Powder, so I only have to take a single hit from the Raichu, and then hopefully it's just gonna snooze for the rest of the battle, which is exactly what happens here. Okay, Rival 4. There's a hilarious interaction that can play out here where you go for Sleep Powder, miss, then the Furo uses Mirror Move and puts your Pokemon to sleep. In a case like that, I think that resetting is the fastest way to play, since sleep can often waste more time than the reset can also incur. Plus, while you're asleep, the Furo will continue to use Mirror Move, and yeah, it's gonna keep mirroring Sleep Powder as you snooze, so if you wake up and you miss again, it can just put you to sleep and waste even more time. Luckily in this case, no sleep shenanigans, so I knock out the Furo, and then from there the rest of the battle's really easy for Butterfree, as are all of the Chandler in Pokemon Tower as well as Jesse and James. Time for mid-game training. On Cycling Road, 2 trainers, the Wheezing Guy as well as Biker Boss. In the Safari Zone, I pick up the Carbos. I haven't talked about vitamins in these playthroughs yet, but it is very important for Butterfree to be picking up Carbos. In the department store, I also bought 2 of them, and this ensures that I have some key outspeeds later into the run. Erica's next. By the way, for all three of these Pokemon, I am fighting the Cool Trainer in front of her just for a little bit of additional experience. The Execute person doesn't give nearly as much. Okay, so Erica, you would expect this one to be pretty easy as we are a bug flying type, but that is not the case. Remember, bug types take super effective damage from poison type moves, and both Weepinbell and Gloom have Acid, a move that can lower your defense, and the chance of that happening is 33% in Generation 1. Watch how much damage Butterfree is taking from Acid. Yeah, roughly half from a single hit. Because of that, if the Weepinbell lowers your defense and then the Gloom attacks, it is possible for Butterfree to lose this fight if you're not just spamming Sleep Powder, but then you could miss and lose anyway. I think that just going for all-out offense here against the two Pokemon you have super effective damage against makes more sense for Butterfree, so that's what I did. Still though, I am going to save before Erica because I want to play this as safely as possible. Luckily today, no resets, so I come through with a victory on my first attempt and then head to Sylph. Because I can't learn Swords Dance here like with Beedrill, I'm going to take the standard approach to my Sylph training. Machoke Candy, 4 Rocket, the guy with 3 Pokemon south of him, then the Reception Rocket, the Grimy Scientist, the Machoke Grunt, the Stacked Scientist, the Protein Scientist, and finally the mandatory Arbok Grunt. This experience levels Butterfree up to 40, and then I can use 3 rare candies to go to 43 prior to fighting the rival. This damage rounding threshold ensures that I get 2 shots on the Sandslash and the Cloyster when using Psychic. At level 40, I would have a 3 shot on both of them, which means I can take a lot of damage, since Aurora Beam is super effective and does between 33 and 40% with a single hit. And then I have to knock out the Magneton, which takes 3 turns if I'm using either Psychic or Double Edge, which I currently have on my set, just so Butterfree can one-shot the Kadabra. After that, I have to 3 or 4 hit the Flareon, so again, Sleep Powder is my path to victory here. Luckily, the Flareon here doesn't know Flamethrower, so its best move is Ember, which does between 32 and 38% damage, but if I got hit by 2 Aurora Beams from the Cloyster and then a single Ember from the Flareon, it would be enough damage to knock Butterfree out. For that reason, the rare candies here make the fight more consistent. Jesse and James, they're easy. Giovanni is easy. I have taught Butterfree Mega Drain at this point in the run, so it can knock out Pokemon like the Rhyhorn more quickly. That brings Butterfree up to level 45, and then I head to Koga's gym. This is another place where Double Edge is helpful. Against the Juggler specifically, who has a lot of Psychic types, and so I can use physical damage to knock them out. That said, Butterfree's attack leaves a lot to be desired, so Double Edge only has a 40.2% chance to knock out the Drowsy in a single hit. And on the next mandatory Juggler, I only have a 61.5% chance to 2-shot the Hypno. Luckily, unlike this guy's Drowsy, the Hypno does not know Psychic, so in the end, he's not really that problematic. Koga is quite easy for Butterfree. I have guaranteed 1-hits on all of the Venonats just using Psychic, and then while I do underspeed the Venomoth, its Psychic only does between 25 and 30% damage to Butterfree, and my Psychic has a 75.3% chance to 2-shot. And that's not including the upside of lowering Special. Also, Venomoth is locked into using Toxic, which it views as super effective against Butterfree until I have a status condition. Then it's going to randomize between Leech Life, Double Team, and Psychic. That gives Butterfree all the time it needs, and this fight ends up being really simple. My former mascot earns a Koga split of 33 minutes and 45 seconds. Okay, time to go back to the current mascot. This is one really nice move that I got from Zealouspawn, which is you can use 1 rare candy after doing all of the previous training to go up to level 27 and learn Leech Life right before the Wrapping Lass. This way, Venomoth can just one-shot all of her Pokemon, and Leech Life is super effective against Pokemon like the Slowpoke in Rock Tunnel. So overall, it's not going to have issues here, except for potentially the self-destructing Hiker. Its higher special stat when compared with Butterfree is not enough of a difference to give one-shots against these rock-type Pokemon, so there is the chance that they self-destruct and knock out Venomoth, but there's also the chance that they just use useless moves, which is exactly what happens here. Now, access to Leech Life also gives Venomoth another advantage when compared with Butterfree. I don't need to fight the one optional trainer in the Rocket Hideout to pick up the Double Edge TM, because I already have physical damage that is super effective against Psychic-type Pokemon. In the department store, I buy myself 2 Carbos. Again, speed is critical for Venomoth, but unlike Butterfree, which is going to be slower than some Pokemon in the playthrough, Venomoth is going to outspeed everything. I pick up Psychic, then I fight Rival 4. He's really easy. All the Chandler are easy. Jesse and James are easy. Cycling Road is easy, because Psychic's great for training here. I fight the Wheezing guy. This cue ball who has 2 fighting types, as well as the biker boss. Next is Erica, and she is so much easier than when using Butterfree. Venomoth is the poison type, and that really messes up Erica's AI. She has no idea what to do. Because of that, she uses Razor Leaf against Venomoth, which inflicts almost no damage. I'm also using Leech Life here, so I gain back health on every turn. I think the only way for Venomoth to kind of get messed up here is if Erica lands a sleep powder and then Venomoth snoozes for way too long. It's really only going to be a time waste, because Venomoth will wake up and knock her Pokemon out in enough time. Like, what is the chance that we sleep so long, get hit by acid, having our defense dropped multiple times, and then eventually Erica takes care of Venomoth? Yeah, that's just not going to happen. This fight is trivial. Now, Venomoth's better stats give it another advantage during Sylph. I don't need to train as much here. In the playthrough, I have already used 2 rare candies earlier on than Butterfree did, and I'm going to use 4 now to go from level 39 to 43 to have the same level to fight Rival 5. And that means I cut 1 level of training, so I only need to fight the Machoke Rocket, the Grunt with 4 Pokemon, the Wheezing guy south of him, the Reception Rocket, and then the Stacked Scientist. That gets Venomoth to level 39, and then I use candies before fighting the Arbok trainer so that I keep his experience. Level 43 is key for the next fight because there are some flaws for Venomoth's strategies. While it does have better damage ranges against both the Sandslash and the Cloyster, it has a worse damage range against the Kadabra, which can hit Venomoth for super effective damage using Psybeam. But that's why we're using candies, so we have Sleep Powder for this fight. Then I can make any Pokemon snooze if I really want to, but I don't really want to unless I absolutely have to. By the time I make it to the Flareon, it did make sense to use Sleep Powder, and this gets so sketchy. The Flareon starts using Fire Spin, draining Venomoth's health. I put it to sleep, but it wakes back up. I misplay here a little bit, tank another Fire Spin, which luckily only hits 2 times, leaving Venomoth on 3 hit points. Okay, so I guess I'm going to try Sleep Powder again. I'm not sure that Psychic is going to knock it out from this damage range. Luckily, it hits. I use Psychic. Flareon survives, so it's good I went for Sleep Powder. Then, since I've depleted Psychic, I have to follow up with Psybeam, which knocks the Flareon out. Inside Koga's gym, Venomoth is technically slower against the jugglers because it has to 2-shot all of the Drowsy using Leech Life. It is wasting more time with Leech Life if it's healing its health since it has to animate another HP bar, but if I'm at full health, then I'm not incurring that downside. And overall, when compared with Butterfree, I prefer this since Butterfree sometimes needs to go back to the Pokemon Center after using Double Edge. Koga is really easy. I outspeed the Venomoth, which was not something that Butterfree was doing. And in this case, I have a 2-shot, so yeah, Koga's completely simple. But with him out of the way, things have the potential to get very rough for these bugs. Blaine is coming up next. With the speed boost that I just earned from Koga's badge, Venomoth has enough to move first against all of his fire-type Pokemon. Plus, defeating him is going to give me a badge so that I take less damage from Sabrina's special attackers. Wow, that is like the loudest meow that you've had in a while, Truro. Well done. For Venomoth, the fight's fairly straightforward. Put his Pokemon to sleep with Sleep Powder, then use Psychic to knock them out. Now I really like using this move against Blaine when I'm fearful of his special attacks, because it both softens his Pokemon up, allowing me to knock them out in less turns, as well as reducing the damage that he might deal if I miss with a Sleep Powder. And this is where I started to feel like the Venomoth run that I was doing was really lucky. While we only have 1 fast reset on Surge, we're not going to get any more here on Blaine. I make it through unscathed. With his badge, I head back to Saffron City, pick up the Mimic TM, and then face Sabrina. In this case, look at Venomoth's speed. Investing in Carbos throughout the playthrough has given me 136 for this battle, which ensures that I move first against every single one of her Pokemon. Now, I didn't want to use Sleep Powder in this fight, but that comes at a major cost. The Kadabra attacks with Psychic, its most powerful move, and this does so much damage. Venomoth survives on orange health and moves on to the Alakazam. Because of the position I was put into by the Kadabra, I decided to use Sleep Powder here. But then it misses, Alakazam uses Psy Wave, and it takes Venomoth down to 1 hit point. Okay, Sleep Powder again, it misses. Sabrina uses an X Defend, it misses again. Sabrina chooses to use Reflect, and then Sleep Powder finally puts the Alakazam to sleep. But it's set up with Reflect and X Defend, so now my Leech Lives are doing almost nothing. Unless Venomoth gets a critical hit, inflicting massive damage, allowing me to knock the Alakazam out. This is another really lucky win for Venomoth. Before heading to the Viridian City Gym, I'm going to teach Venomoth one more move, Mega Drain in the place of Psybeam. This gives me solutions to like the random NPC's Rhyhorn here, so I can knock it out a little bit quicker than I would have with Psychic. Then, once knocking out all of the Black Belt's Pokemon, Venomoth levels up to 49, and I'm going to use 4 rare candies here to get to level 53. This dramatically increases consistency against Giovanni. Dugtrio is first, Sleep Powder, Guard Spec, of course he's sponsored by Guard Spec, then Sleep Powder, put it to sleep, knock it out with 2 turns of Psychic. Then Guard Spec on the Persian while I put it to sleep, 2 Psychics here, knock it out, and then I can just spam Psychic against the Nidoqueen and Nidoking. They can't really do that much damage to Venomoth. As you see here with Nidoqueen going for Thunder, it does almost nothing. Then Nidoking just gets a Guard Spec and I knock it out for free, moving on to the Rhydon. Now, Venomoth cannot knock his ace out with a single hit from Mega Drain, which does seem a little bit surprising, but at level 53, I am guaranteed to survive one hit from Rock Slide provided it doesn't crit. And in this case, it doesn't, so Venomoth lives on red health and knocks out Giovanni's ace. Without using the rare candies, Rock Slide does between 90 and 107% damage, so Rhydon would have a 43.2% chance to one-shot there. But with the rare candies and without a critical hit, even the maximum damage roll with Rock Slide does not do enough. Rival 6. I wanted to play this one a little bit risky and I didn't go for Sleep Powder against the Execute, but then it chooses Stun Spore, paralyzing Venomoth. This ends in a reset. The safer way to play is Sleep Powder on the Execute, avoid Stun Spore, and then knock it out with 2 hits from Leech Life. Unfortunately, Leech Life is not one-shotting. I wish it did. And the rest of the Rivals Pokemon all can be problematic, so I like to put a good number of them to sleep. For example, Magneton, Kadabra, as well as Flareon, which in this case does know Flamethrower, and while I miss with Sleep Powder, it just keeps using Fire Spin before I put it to sleep, so I win on my second attempt. Overall, still, I think this is a fairly lucky Venomoth playthrough, and the reset here wasn't that long. Losing to the Flareon is much more substantial than losing earlier in the fight against the Execute. Inside Victory Road, to make sure that experience works out for Venomoth, I fight one trainer who I call Cool Water. He has 3 Water-type Pokemon. This brings Venomoth almost up to level 56, but it doesn't need to pop over the level threshold in order for everything to work out against the League. Back to Butterfree. It's just defeated Koga, so I'm going to surf south of Pallet Town, and on my way to Cinnabar Island, I am going to battle some optional trainers. Psyche, as well as these 2 trainers close to him, which both have Tentacruel. This brings Butterfree up to level 48, and here I want you to observe its speed stat, which is 115. Not enough to move first against all of Blaine's Pokemon. But with the Carbos I've invested into in this run, as well as 1 more rare candy, I can bring Butterfree up to level 49, which takes its speed to 118. And then using the Carbos inside of Cinnabar Mansion, I can bring it up to 119 speed, which is 1 more than all of Blaine's Pokemon. And this gives an additional benefit that Butterfree is also going to outspeed Sabrina's Kadabra. The plan for Blaine is the same as it was with Venomoth. Sleep Powder everything, knock them out with Psychic. It's kind of sketchy, but like Venomoth, Butterfree does not have a reset here, so overall I'm feeling good about this playthrough. Still only 1 reset. Next is Sabrina. This one is more annoying, I would say, since I have to use Double Edge, but she can't do that much damage to me due to my typing. I 2-shot the Kadabra and then move on to the Alakazam. This one I put to sleep with Sleep Powder. Now my health was low, so I use a little bit of Mega Drain, gaining back a little bit of health before using Double Edge again to knock out the Alakazam. Inside the Viridian City Gym, I'm going to make a very different choice with Butterfree, because unlike Venomoth, it's not going to survive hits from Rhydon's Rock Slide, so I need a different approach here. One of the grandfathered strategies that I have from much earlier in this series is that I can use Mimic to steal Double Team from the enemy's moves, and that's going to be Butterfree's path to victory here. It can mimic the move from Persian, set up its evasion, and then knock out the rest of Giovanni's Pokemon. Just so you're aware how bad things are against the Rock Sliding Rhydon, Mega Drain does between 68 and 80% damage without any badge boosts. By the way, here where I'm using Double Team, it is badge boosting my special, which will increase the damage of both Psychic against the Nidos and Mega Drain against the Rhydon. That said, without badge boosts, Rock Slide does between 206 and 243% damage. There is an alternative path to victory here, which is just putting Giovanni's Pokemon to sleep and hoping that that works, but stacking up badge boosts, giving Butterfree one-shots is far more reliable. Psychic now has a 98.6% chance on Nidoqueen, a 97.2% chance on Nidoking, and Mega Drain is guaranteed against Rhydon. Rhydon. By the way, even after all the double teams and the badge boosts from them, Rock Slide still does between 109 and 128% damage, so if Rhydon hits with Rock Slide, Butterfree still loses. But today, Butterfree is getting lucky. It has no resets to Giovanni. Okay, Rival 6 was really frustrating in this run. So there's a kind of tension here at the beginning of the battle. The Sandslash is locked into using Poison Sting because it views it as super effective against Butterfree's bug type. Because of this, you can kind of just attack the Sandslash and you don't have to put it to sleep, but if it poisons Butterfree, then the rest of the battle gets a lot sketchier because you want to gain back health. After all, Butterfree isn't knocking these Pokemon out particularly quickly. Also, I am mimicking Slash here from the Sandslash so that I have a physical move to knock the Kadabra out later in the fight. This is because I had to give up Double Edge in order to have Mimic for Giovanni. There was no other way to get around this because I need to keep Psychic and Mega Drain for later in the Elite Four. If I'm poisoned, I think just resetting right away would have been the right choice. I tried to play it out, but it doesn't work out. Magneton uses Thunder Shock, and that's that. In the next fight, I played safer. I put the Sandslash to sleep, then put the Execute to sleep. Of course, I have to 3-shot here even using Slash, which is pretty frustrating, but things can still go wrong. I miss Sleep Powder on the Magneton, get paralyzed, and then Thunder Shock does tons of damage. I do eventually put the Magneton to sleep, but it's still not enough. The Electric type eventually gets Butterfree. 2 resets to Rival 6. Now, just like with Beedrill, which used Hyper Beam previously to defeat Blaine, with Butterfree I had a more consistent strategy in my previous attempt. Remember though, 4 years ago, I purchased Substitute from the Game Corner, and this move is so reliable on Butterfree. It essentially makes Sleep Powder more consistent, because you put the opponent to sleep, set up Substitute, and then if they wake up, you have 2 turns to put them back to sleep without taking damage, because they have to break your Substitute before damaging you. And it also blocks moves like Thunder Wave, meaning the Magneton wouldn't even be able to paralyze me here. It would just try Thunder Wave, fail, and waste a turn. If I think back to all of my Pokemon Yellow playthroughs up until now, I think using Butterfree with Substitute is one of my favorite runs. It felt so consistent and dominant, and it made one of my favorite Pokemon an absolute joy to play. That said, just like Hyper Beam, Substitute isn't viable because of the time commitment required to get the move. So instead, I am trapped in this awfulness, spamming Sleep Powder and hoping that it will work. Luckily, on my 3rd attempt against the rival, it does. His Pokemon snooze, and I make it to Victory Road. Just like with Venomoth, I'm going to fight Cool Water to gain experience, but since Butterfree is at a lower level, this does allow me to level up to 54. Then I use 6 rare candies, boosting Butterfree to level 60, and now it's ready for the Elite Four. But Beedrill still needs to catch up. Of all the playthroughs, this one is the one that requires the most finesse. With both Venomoth and Butterfree, all you have to know is where to use Sleep Powder, and that's fairly easy to intuit. If the Pokemon has super effective damage or an annoying status condition, you should put it to sleep. If it doesn't have one of those things, then just attack it with Psychic. It's gonna be fine. If Psychic doesn't do a lot of damage, well then maybe Mimic something or use Mega Drain. That's the entire logic tree. With Beedrill on the other hand though, we have to know how many times we're gonna use Agility or Swords Dance, which moves we should be using, and we also need to know how many times to badge boost to get certain of our stats into key damage ranges, or into key speed ranges. There's also some downsides using Beedrill in the mid-game, because I'm setting up Swords Dance to knock out Grunt's Pokemon in Sylph. Occasionally this can go wrong if you haven't studied your damage ranges against these random people that much. I didn't know I needed 2 Swords Dances for this fight. I tried to get through on only 1. I barely don't knock the Golbat out. It confuses Beedrill, and I have to take a Blackout here, which was really frustrating. Remember, when you've set up your attack stat, your Pokemon calculates confusion damage with its attack and its defense, which is extra bad in this scenario after I set up with Swords Dance and got hit by 1 Screech. Beedrill has 255 attack and 36 defense. Luckily, I get my revenge against this trainer next time. No more Blackouts against random NPCs from here on out. Rival 5. Here, the Sandslash is not locked into using Poison Sting. Instead, it can go for powerful moves like Slash. My goal is to get Beedrill set up to +6. If it can get there, then it's going to sweep the rival's team easily. If it doesn't, then it usually loses to Sandslash, which is a fast reset. Also, setting up against the Sandslash is slightly more reliable than it is with most Pokemon because I have Swift, so even if it goes for Sand Attack, I can still bypass accuracy checks, although I just forget to do this for a little while until the Kadabra comes out, then I finally use Swift to knock it and the Flareon out. There is really only one way Beedrill can lose once it gets fully set up in this fight, and that's simply getting a critical hit, rolling worse damage because crits bypass all stat changes in Generation 1. Because of that, I have a roughly 85% chance to one-hit most of the rival's Pokemon, so there is always that 15% chance that things go wrong on any given turn. With Sylph finished off, I head south towards Cinnabar Island. Here, I fight Psyche, this swimmer, and then the guy who only has one Starmie. In order to successfully navigate to this trainer, I have to go down south on the left-hand side of the route until I see this trainer, then I go slightly above him and surf over to the right. This way I can fight the swimmer with Starmie quickly. Once I dig out of the mansion, this takes me back to Saffron City, and that's perfect. I can pick up Mimic and then fight Sabrina. But before I battle her, I'm going to fight two trainers inside of her gym. The Psychic in the first room, and then I move diagonally into the second room, and I'm going to fight this Psychic as well, who has 4 Pokemon. He gives really good experience, and that brings Beedrill up to nearly level 49 before I take on the Psychic type specialist. With 123 speed, I can move first against all of Sabrina's Pokemon with the exception of the Alakazam. But with Koga's badge, if I use a single Swords Dance against the Kadabra, then I can outspeed the Alakazam and one-shot it. One way to lose here is if the Kadabra uses Psychic, does massive damage, and one-shots Beedrill, which is exactly what happens here. Another potential way to lose would be the more annoying path, Kinesis lowering my accuracy and then failing to attack the Alakazam over and over again. But I'm specifically playing around having my accuracy dropped by knocking out the Abra so that it doesn't use Flash, and then I'm more likely to have a beneficial outcome against the Kadabra. It could go for Psywave, it could also miss Kinesis. Now I'm missing the most obvious thing here, which is Beedrill knows Swift. I don't have to worry about accuracy drops, which means the obvious thing to do here is set up on the Abra, use Swords Dance 2 times, and then sweep her team with Swift. I don't know why this didn't stick out to me in the moment. This is definitely one reset that could have been prevented. Defeating Sabrina brings Beedrill up to level 49, and I use 9 rare candies to boost it to level 58, and I also teach Double Edge before facing Blaine. Now, I need to get 2 Swords Dances off against him. This gives me really favorable damage ranges against all of his Pokemon. Double Edge has a 98.9% chance on Ninetales, a guarantee on Rapidash, and an 85.5% chance on Arcanine, so I fail to knock it out if I get a critical hit. Luckily in Pokemon Yellow, Blaine does not have good AI, so he has no idea that Ninetales should be using Flamethrower. But the Ninetales can also mess Beedrill up by using Confuse Ray. In this case, it'll hit itself and deal massive damage because of Swords Dance. Due to this, I end up losing once. In the second fight, the Ninetales just uses Tail Whip and Quick Attack, and then I'm able to use Double Edge. Ninetales goes down, Rapidash goes down, and against Arcanine, I don't get a critical hit, so Blaine is defeated. In the Viridian City Gym, I want to talk about Mega Drain on Beedrill. It can learn this move, and it does do 4 times damage to rock types. It would even let me one-shot this Rhyhorn, but overall I don't think it's the right approach. Again, opening the inventory takes time, teaching a move incurs risk, and it doesn't really solve that many fights. Plus, as soon as I get to Giovanni, I'm going to need to teach Beedrill Mimic so that it has access to a move that will be super effective against his Pokemon, because I'm stealing Earthquake from the Dugtrio. This incurs a small amount of risk. It could go for Sand Attack, lowering my accuracy, and I don't have access to Swift anymore since I've taught Double Edge. I also don't want to be using Double Edge here because taking recoil damage throughout the fight isn't a good idea when he has 5 Pokemon. But with Earthquake, I can set up Swords Dance twice and then sweep his team. Okay, I think Rival 6 gives me the perfect opportunity to illustrate how different Beedrill is from both Venomoth and Butterfree. Those two feel very similar, but Beedrill hardly struggles against the rival. The only thing that can go wrong here is the Sandslash attacking over and over again with Slash getting constant critical hits. If I'm trying to set up to +6, then things can go wrong. But once Beedrill gets set up to +6 with Swords Dance, it can just crush his entire team. Twin Needle is so much better against the Execute, so there's no chance of Stun Spore here. It's also doing enough damage to one-shot Pokemon like Cloyster and Magneton, which are usually defensive beasts. And by the time I reach the Flareon, I have enough health left over to simply use Double Edge and finish the battle confidently. Inside Victory Road, I need to do one battle. I had to choose which trainer to do this because I need to get Beedrill to level 61. I fight this tamer in order to do this because he only has 2 Pokemon, so the fight is fairly fast. Then I use 2 rare candies, boosting Beedrill up to level 63 over a damage rounding threshold, and with that, all 3 Pokemon are ready for the Elite Four. Lorelai's first, and because Beedrill is a poison type, she is far more likely to use Rest with the Dugong on every turn. That essentially gives Beedrill free setup here using Swords Dance. Then Twin Needle can one-shot the Cloyster, one-shot the Slowbro, one-shot the Jinx, and against the Lapras I use Double Edge, but this isn't strictly required. Twin Needle does essentially the same amount of damage. The Hiker in the next room, I have to play semi-intelligently, mimicking Dig from the Onix, so I have a ground type move to knock out the rock Pokemon. Also, it gives me a non-recoil damage to knock out all of the fighting types with, because as you can see, when I try Twin Needle against the Hitmonchan, this is not the correct move to use. That was really risky, by the way. I could have got burned by Fire Punch or frozen by Ice Punch, or even thawed by Fire Punch again. In this case, with Swords Dance set up, the rest of his team is easy to take care of. Agatha, Twin Needle's enough here. Swords Dance, I could mimic Substitute, but it's not really required. With just one turn of Swords Dance, the damage ranges here are so favorable that sweeping the rest of her ghosts is pretty consistent. Sure, the final Gengar can hit with Psychic, but I can also just one turn it using my bug type move. We don't need agility because the fastest Pokemon in the game is Aerodactyl. Beedrill enters the fight against Lance with 167 speed, but after one turn of Swords Dance, it has more than enough to outspeed everything in this fight. I set up to +6 against the Gyarados, then I use Twin Needle to knock it out. This takes 2 turns, so it's a bit slow, but the first Dragonair goes down in only 1 turn. Then, since I've badge boosted, I can mimic Ice Beam and one-shot the Dragonair and the Aerodactyl. This is where I didn't know my damage ranges. I just assumed that even though I level up going into the Dragonite, Ice Beam would do enough damage with 4 times damage to knock out the Dragonite in a single hit. Turns out this is not the case. The Dragonite survives, goes for Fire Blast, and luckily for Beedrill, it just misses, allowing me to knock it out on the next turn. The correct choice there was using Double Edge at the very end of the battle to knock out the Dragonite with an 85% chance. Okay, the champion is a bit of a mixed bag for Beedrill. This one is more consistent than both Butterfree and Venomoth. That said, it's not so consistent. The Sandslash really does like using Slash in this case. If you watch its behavior, it's alternating between Slash and Fury Swipes, so I have upside for Fury Swipes and downside for Slash. It's not choosing Earthquake because it's checking the types in a bad order. It checks Earthquake against the Bug type and finds out it's not very effective, and then never checks the Poison type interaction, so it's never going to use Earthquake. And it's also checking the Poison Sting against the Poison type, so it's not going to use this because it's not checking it against the Bug type. This makes setting up at the beginning of the fight really annoying, and I also want to mimic Earthquake to make the Magneton more consistent later in the battle. Because of this, the Sandslash knocks me out in the first fight. Then in the second fight, I make it by the Sandslash, but with only +2. If my health is low and I have to do the fight on +2, then the Cloyster later on becomes sketchy because I don't have a guaranteed 2-shot. And unless it misses trying a move like Clamp, I'm going to get destroyed. In this case, Aurora Beam finishes Beedrill for a second time. I come back in, try again, Sandslash, slashes too many times, so Beedrill faints again. And then finally, in my third attempt, the Sandslash misses a Fury Swipes, and I knock it out, moving on with orange health for the rest of the battle. Still not enough to make me feel really confident, but with +2, I'm able to one-hit everything until the Cloyster. Even if it uses Clamp, it can hit a small number of times, 2 in this case, leaving Beedrill with 26 hit points. Enough to finish the Cloyster in 2 hits, one-shot the Flareon, and clock in with its time. 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 45 seconds, with 6 resets, 5 blackouts at level 67, with a game time of 4 hours and 11 minutes. Okay, this is where things get painful for me with Beedrill. I was kind of happy with this time, but after the first playthrough, especially that one blackout during Sylph, I knew that I could play this better, and I could also just get a much luckier champion. I went back to the early game and I tried to make things more efficient here, blacking out the random trainers in Viridian Forest to get through Brock, hopefully with a better split. But what I found was my first run ended up getting an amazing Brock split, 17 minutes and 48 seconds. I think if going for the level 18 Brock attempt, anything under 18 minutes is a really great time, because I tried for an entire evening and I could not get a Brock split that was faster than my previous attempt. Also, it's worth noting that sometimes you get to Brock at level 18 and you just lose right away with a split that would have been worse than my previous Brock split. So then I would take a reset and I would get like a 19 minute or 20 minute Brock split, further pushing Beedrill's time. So yeah, I just stopped attempting Beedrill, and it turns out that in this video, the first run back I did with Beedrill is gonna be the run that I rank it with. I think this is the first time this has ever happened. It is almost always the case that if I put in more time, I can get a better time, and I'm sure I could eventually get a better Beedrill time, and it's very obvious that I would get a better Beedrill time if I just went for a more risky Brock strategy, but that is not something that I'm going to enjoy doing. So yeah, Beedrill's ranking off of this time. But before we do that, let's continue with Butterfree. Lorelei is kind of annoying at the beginning of the fight because I have to put both the Dugong and the Cloyster to sleep. I also have to put the Slowbro to sleep, but then from there things get much easier. Mimic Amnesia, set up so that my special stat is ridiculous, then sweep through her remaining Pokemon. By the way, the reason I'm putting the Jinx to sleep is because it has Ice Punched me in the past and frozen Butterfree. Yeah, I don't want that to happen again. This guy is easy. We have Psychic moves and Grass moves. Agatha is also easy because we have Psychic moves. While her Pokemon aren't all 1-hits, they're at least 2-hits, which minimizes the chance for her to do annoying shenanigans like putting me to sleep with the final Gengar. But I do go for Sleep Powder there just to play as safely as possible. Before the next fight, 1 rare candy so that Butterfree doesn't level up. Now Lance is where things get a little bit scary for Butterfree. In Pokemon Yellow, his Aerodactyl has Wing Attack and Fly, 2 moves it does not have access to in Pokemon Red and Blue. Because of this, and its propensity to get critical hits, it has a 25% chance. Both Fly and Wing Attack pose a significant threat to Butterfree, and Butterfree is not faster than the Aerodactyl. There are some ways around this. Number 1, I can buy time against the Gyarados spamming useless moves like Mega Drain and hope that it goes for Leer. If it badge boosts me once, then I can outspeed the Aerodactyl and knock it out using Ice Beam. This strategy front loads the risk in the fight because Gyarados can knock out Butterfree using powerful moves like Hyper Beam or Hydro Pump. Look at what happens here when it wakes up. It does half damage with a single hit. The alternative way to play this fight is just hope that the Aerodactyl goes for Wing Attack and put the Gyarados to sleep. Overall, when thinking about it a little bit, I like this strategy less. I think getting hit by Leer on the Gyarados is the more effective play because then from there the rest of the fight is more straightforward. That said, you could still miss Sleep Powder on the second Dragonair, which you do need to put to sleep so that it doesn't use Thunder Wave and ruin your speed. Also, Thunderbolt will do a lot of damage to Butterfree because it's a flying type. Once I make it to the second Dragonair, put it to sleep, steal Ice Beam, and then hope that the Aerodactyl goes for Wing Attack, which it does. But Butterfree doesn't one-shot the Aerodactyl. So this is why you should use Leer at the beginning of the fight to badge boost and one-shot. But in this case, Lance uses a Hyper Potion, not attacking, and then I attack again, freezing the Aerodactyl, and I get to knock it out. So my crimes are forgiven. I get to knock out the Dragonite in one hit and move on to the champion. This fight is theoretically awful. I really hate it. Sandslash can do a lot of damage with Slash. Alakazam can lower my accuracy with Kinesis, or lower my special with Psychic, or confuse with Psybeam. But getting the special drop or the accuracy drop are definitely the things that Butterfree fears most. Then Executor can waste my time with Hypnosis. Magneton can paralyze or do a lot of damage with Thunderbolt. Cloyster can freeze with Ice Beam or just do a lot of damage with the Ice type moves. And because Butterfree is a flying type, it is never going to use Clamp or Spike Cannon. And if I make it all the way to the Flareon, then it can go for Flamethrower, but it can also whiff with Fire Spin. I think of all the Pokemon on the Champions team against Butterfree, the Flareon is the least scary. That said, I am still going to put every single Pokemon on his team to sleep before knocking them out. This route lines things up perfectly for Butterfree. Look at it going into the fight. It is level 63, and then once it defeats the Sandslash, it levels up into the Alakazam, and that gives Butterfree 157 speed so that it can move first against every Pokemon on the Champions team. If I went into this fight at any lower level, I would underspeed the Alakazam, and then things would be far more inconsistent than they already are using Sleep on every Pokemon. That didn't seem like a good choice for me. Still, this fight takes forever because the Executor I have to knock out with a combination of Psychic, Earthquake, and Mega Drain. We don't have a Bug type move or a Flying type move. Poor Butterfree. I really wish this Pokemon got Fly, then at least it would have a same type attack bonus move and we could do better damage to the Executor. In the end though, this fight is just luck. And things once again don't work out for me on my second attempt, which is really sad. Look at the time, 49 minutes and 5 seconds. I was on track with this playthrough to potentially squeeze in under 50 minutes, but I think because of how slow the Executor is, I was really looking at more of a 50-minute and 30-second time with Butterfree in that attempt. But then I make it to the Executor and I'm not able to knock it out, so I have to reset again. Alright, now the clock is officially over 50 minutes. Still though, Butterfree is going to get a low 50-minute time unless things continue going wrong. Well, this time I'm able to knock out the Executor without it getting me. I move on to the Magneton, put it to sleep. Earthquake Earthquake is exclusively so I can knock out the Magneton and the Flareon slightly faster, reducing the number of times I need to use Sleep Powder. Then I successfully put the Cloyster to sleep. Alright, just one more left. Sleep Powder, please come through for me. It does. Flareon goes to sleep, and I can two-shot using Earthquake. With Butterfree, I get a time of 51 minutes and 26 seconds, with 6 resets, 0 blackouts at level 65, with a game time of 3 hours and 8 minutes. Unlike with Beedrill, this was my third playthrough with Butterfree back. I played one slightly earlier into the year, then I played one learning this new route that Zealous Pawn provided, and then I played this playthrough which gave me this time. I was hoping the time could be a little bit closer to 50 minutes, but still I think these results are representative of Butterfree's playthroughs. There's the chance that it can go under 50 minutes, maybe like a 48 or 47 minute time with no resets. That said, I don't think most playthroughs that people are going to do is going to get that time. You're going to be resetting because Sleep Powder is inconsistent. By the way, Zealous Pawn was able to get a sub 50 minute Butterfree time. He got 49 minutes and 48 seconds, just barely squeezing in under the threshold. That Butterfree playthrough also had 4 resets, so even then, it's not a perfect run. Getting a clean Butterfree playthrough would be absolutely terrible. I can't wait till someone in the community does, but it's not going to be me. Okay, Venomoth. This is the one unintuitive Pokemon in the late game. With Butterfree, it was fairly obvious. We need Psychic and Mega Drain, and it seems like we should also have Mega Drain with Venomoth, but we don't. We've given it up for Mimic right before Lorelei. This seems to make no sense because Mega Drain is super effective against her Pokemon, but Leech Life is also helpful, and we have Amnesia plus Psychic, which gives Venomoth options against everything, and we need to hold on to Leech Life. Let me explain why. Once Lorelei's defeated, I use Venomoth's final rare candy to go up to level 58 before taking on the Hiker. He's easy. So is Agatha. Now, look at Venomoth's speed going into the Lance fight. 169, which is nice, because once I knock out the Gyarados at the beginning of the fight, I level up to 60, giving Venomoth 173 speed. So it is going to move first against the Aerodactyl by a small margin. I finish off the first Dragonair using Sleep Powder to avoid Thunder Wave, and then I mimic Ice Beam after using Sleep Powder, and this move can one-shot the Dragonair, the Aerodactyl, as well as the Dragonite. Okay, so time to roll the intro for the champion, but we're not going to jump right into my footage of the champion battle. Instead, we are going to view an attempt that Austin did against the champion, where he kept Mega Drain instead of keeping Leech Life. Now, one thing to note here, he is doing a slightly different Mimic than I was doing, and I think that mimicking Earthquake would make more sense rather than stealing Slash. Slash still gives him physical damage in order to knock out the Alakazam quickly, and then it gives neutral damage, which is okay against the Executor. But he runs out of PP before taking down the Grass type, so he has to finish it using 1 PP of Psychic. Can you see the problem here? He puts the Magneton to sleep, and then he has to finish it using Psychic, which, while it does get a critical hit, it still takes multiple turns, and then the champion uses a full restore, which is really bad. He uses his last Sleep Powder to put the Magneton to sleep, and then using Psychic, he slowly finishes it off. 2 more uses of Psychic, 4 more uses of Mega Drain, and he can't use Sleep Powder anymore. So obviously, Mega Drain for the Cloyster to gain back health before moving on to the Flareon, because it's probably going to obliterate his Venomoth using Flamethrower. But then turn 1, because Venomoth is a poison type, the Flareon goes for Reflect, Venomoth depletes its PP, Flareon starts missing with Fire Blast, and yeah, he wins against the champion using Struggle. This is one of the silliest fights, and it's what happens when you keep Mega Drain and you also don't mimic Earthquake. So the proper solution for Venomoth, this is my footage now, is to go into the fight, mimic Earthquake, keep Leech Life, don't have Mega Drain, then use Leech Life to gain back health on the Alakazam, and Leech Life does 4 times damage to the Executor, allowing me to 3-shot. Well, he uses a full restore, wasting my time, and then I 3-shot, so it was technically a 5-hit. I can then Sleep Powder the Magneton, knock it out with 2 Earthquakes, use Sleep Powder on the Cloyster, knocking it out with 3 Psychics, and then Sleep Powder and Earthquake for a 2-shot on the Flareon. Venomoth clocks in with a time of 43 minutes and 39 seconds, with 2 resets at level 62, with a game time of 2 hours and 50 minutes. Okay, so it happened again. I can't believe I'm saying this. The same thing that happened with Beedrill also happened with Venomoth. This was my first run back with it. I had an incredibly good playthrough. I really wanted to chase down Zealous Pawn's time, which was 41 minutes and 31 seconds. By the way, if you're wondering why Zealous Pawn always gets much better times than I do, he's a better player than I am. Go and check his channel out. He has incredible insights. Anyways, I tried to chase down his time, and then I kept losing to the rival on Nugget Bridge for like a solid 3 hours. hours. And after that, I just decided that this was going to be Venomoth's playthrough, at least for now. It is the channel mascot. I have a strong feeling that in the future I'm going to come back to re-rank this thing. But for now, I think this is a representative run that was pretty lucky and got through the game with a really good time. With that, we have our obvious winner. Venomoth is the best of these three bug types. It beats out Butterfree by almost 10 minutes, and it beats out Beedrill by like infinity time. Beedrill is by far the worst of these three. With its performance today, it unfortunately is not better than Scyther, but it does barely squeeze itself into an E tier finish, behind Hitmonchan and Machop. Really not a good performance for Beedrill. Right now, the only fully evolved Pokemon that it is ahead of in the tier list is Golbat, and Golbat's really bad in Generation 1, so I guess that makes sense. It's also ahead of Aerodactyl. I do think I'll be able to play better with Aerodactyl. Its results are fairly stale at this point. I think it's going to rank up into the E or D tier when I come back to do it eventually, but I have no intents of doing that right away. So for now, Beedrill is one of the worst fully evolved Pokemon in the game. Butterfree, on the other hand, feels like it's much better, but in order to get this tier list balanced visually, I have had to do a lot of weird things with the times that I have on the right hand side of the screen. Because of that, Butterfree is only actually one tier ahead of Beedrill. It earns itself a top spot in the D tier, just behind Bulbasaur and Arbok. While the former mascot didn't perform that well, the current mascot really did quite exceptionally as a bug type in Generation 1. It's able to earn itself an A tier placement, just behind Nidoqueen's current result and ahead of Seadra and Haunter. If you remember that Venomoth can go faster, you might think it's going to be better than Nidoqueen, but no, don't worry. I'm going to come back and do another run with Nidoqueen. It's going to be much faster than Venomoth. Alright, so looking at the tier list right now, I have ranked 127 out of 151 Pokemon. There are only 24 species left to go, and we're going to get through all of them by the end of the year. Because I am getting so close to the end of this project, we also have some comprehensive data now. I have ranked every bug type in the game. So let's filter the tier list and see how all of the bugs stack up against each other. Doing this leads to some surprising results. Venomoth is in first place, Parasect is in second place, despite the fact that its results are multiple years old now. Pinsir is in third, Butterfree in fourth, Scyther in 5th, Beedrill in 6th, and it is the worst fully evolved bug type. Then we have Venonat, which is the best first stage bug type. Paris in the Bruno tier, we skipped over the Surge tier. No bugs have got a result there yet, but if I come back and do Paris again, I definitely think it's going to rank up into the Surge tier because it does get Swords Dance as well as Growth and Spore. And then we have the worst bugs in the game, Weedle, Caterpie, Kakuna, and Metapod. All Pokemon that cannot complete playthroughs with my standard rules. Weedle can win if it uses X items, but Caterpie, Kakuna, and Metapod all cannot win because they don't get moves that attack Ghost-type Pokemon. The reason I find all of this surprising is because Pinsir is an amazing bug type. It gets Swords Dance, it has ridiculously good stats, and Game Freak clearly thought that it was one of the best bug types. They hid it in the Safari Zone or they walled it off in the Game Corner, two places that make it feel like a prize to obtain. Whereas Venomoth is a Pokemon that you can add to your team as early as Misty's gym because they're available in the form of Venonat on Route 24. Something about this though is just really poetic and fitting. My mascot, which is a Pokemon of my favorite type, ends up being the best Pokemon of that type within the game that is my favorite to run in the series. So well done, Venomoth. You are, of course, the best bug. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It means the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video. Okay, let's see how these Pokemon do against Professor Oak. With Venomoth, it's very much the same as everything else in this playthrough. I'm just going to be putting Pokemon to sleep and then knocking them out with Psychic. I have Leech Life for the Executor, but it's pretty high leveled, so it still takes 3 hits to knock out. With all 3 of these Pokemon, I'm going to be going up against the Oak team that has Charizard on it, so there are 2 fire types in a row. I have to first make it through the Arcanine, and then I have to go through the Charizard. In this case though, the Arcanine only has Ember because these Pokemon are assigned their default moves. Because of that, it's not really a threat. But Charizard definitely is. It knows Flamethrower, it can do massive amounts of damage, but Venomoth outspeeds everyone. So I'm just gonna put it to sleep, slowly knock it out with Psychic, move on to the Gyarados, put it to sleep, and then win. I was able to get through Oak on my first attempt with the mascot. Butterfree, on the other hand, did have 1 loss, but it's basically the same. Just put everything to sleep, then knock them out with Psychic. Overall, pretty easy. I had to make one change though because I don't have Leech Life for the Executor. Instead, after putting it to sleep, I can simply use Mimic to steal Stomp, and then the normal move is enough to slowly take care of it. From there, it's just cross your fingers and hope that sleep works, and it did on my second attempt. With Beedrill, things are different. It's kind of the story of this entire video. Beedrill is by far the roughest of these Pokemon, and without Sleep Powder access, this fight's kind of rough. I can set up on the Tauros, but it can use Leer to lower my defense stat, which means if I get hit by even the Executor's Stomp, things can be sketchy. And I also want to mimic a good move from the Executor because Oak has 5 Pokemon, and I only have Twin Needle, which is not going to be good against either Arcanine or Charizard. I could use Double Edge on both of them as well as the Gyarados, but I wasn't sure about recoil damage, especially if I take early damage in the fight from Tauros. One way to compensate is to mimic Stomp from the Executor, but because of Oak's good AI, he's always going to spam Hypnosis, so he has a 60% chance to put Beedrill to sleep while I steal the move. In my first fight, the status condition causes a loss. Another issue that Beedrill has during this fight is there isn't really an ideal place for it to set up. I could try the Executor, but then I risk Hypnosis over and over again, so it seems like Tauros is the best place, because I'm also not going to get through it and the Executor easily without setup and make it to the Arcanine, which will just spam Ember, but even then, the Fire-type move will do decent damage. And it could burn Beedrill having my attack, which counters out the intent of setting up and having a higher attack stat for the rest of the fight. I did decide to set up on the Tauros. It's really bad. If my health is low, then I can't use Double Edge for the remainder of the fight, which constrains Beedrill's damage ranges, meaning it can't one-shot Pokemon. As a result, it gets hit by fire moves and loses over and over. That said, there is still a path to victory. The Tauros can spam Tail Whip and Leer a bunch. If it does this, I can set up Swords Dance essentially for free, maintaining my attack. Then Twin Needle one-shots the Tauros and the Executor. I have full health for the Arcanine. I'm going for Twin Needle here to preserve health, but I don't really know if that's the best choice. I'm still going to take damage from Ember, which is essentially the same as taking recoil from Double Edge. I think going for Double Edge was the right choice, but I still have enough health to use Double Edge on the Charizard that follows, as well as the final Gyarados. So with 5 resets to Oak, Beedrill finally pulls through and wins. This Pokemon is not good in the solo challenge format, at least in Generation 1. Maybe in future generations Beedrill's gonna be better, but there's no Swords Dance TM in Generation 2. I have a sinking feeling that things are only gonna be downhill from here for Beedrill. Okay, that's it. See you next time.